Hey guys, Dr. Sharma here. They say the amount of knowledge you have to learn during medical school is like drinking out of a fire hydrant. Well, they weren't wrong. Flying through 4 years of medical school has arguably been one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But here's the thing, I love challenges. Like, I not only wanted to pass medical school to help those in need, but I also wanted to pass it learning literally as much as I could. And that's for multiple reasons. The first one is just kind of personal. Some of my closest family and friends have unfortunately suffered from medical injuries that may have stemmed from lack of correct judgments made by medical personnel. This may have been due to not knowing the topic fully or not having full empathy at that time. Now, who knows what the actual cause is, but I vowed that I would do my absolute best to learn as much medical knowledge as possible so that I wouldn't make a medical mistake on my watch out of just sheer medical knowledge. Another reason is that I absolutely love every single topic in medicine, which is also a reason why I chose radiology. Anyway, enough chit chat, let's get started. Number one, if you're going to memorize something, you have to figure out how you learn. Unsurprisingly, sheer lecture material has been shown to exhibit very low knowledge retention in students. And I'll be honest, I don't learn by just being in a room and getting hit by just sheer lectures unless I'm really super actively engaged or if I had already read the assigned readings already. And let's be honest, that didn't happen very often. So I used less of my time in actual lectures and more of my time solo studying. So I was starting to figure out how I learn. Other ways that you can take raw information and process it is called audio learning, meaning that someone's speaking to you orally and you're not writing anything down or watching anything while they're speaking. Visual learning, meaning seeing diagrams, relationships with different topics, and seeing something as a picture. Reading and writing learners who will read and pretty much jot things down in text. And kinesthetics, meaning you're actively engaged in the learning process, kind of like riding a bicycle. Of course, the best type of learning is going to be using a mixture of all of these, but I truly believe that I and the majority of people learn with audio and kinesthetic learning. I figured out exactly how I would learn using these two types of learning techniques, and that's how I was going to memorize huge amounts of information. Elaborating more on the visual learning techniques, I would actually literally draw really silly pictures in my textbooks, and these silly drawings could use an array of colors and objects and a lot of details in the picture in order to help me visualize and understand information. Not only that, but the more detail I used, I realized I was able to really memorize that information because it's just a silly drawing that you've created to make a mnemonic for what you're trying to remember. Number two is that I had to use a review technique, and I used very few review techniques. Remember, once you figured out how you learn and how you review things, you really want to stick with those techniques. For me, it was using flashcards and literally rereading my textbook. You see, I didn't really want to use some new fancy software or some sort of recall system that I had to use a computer for or get kind of confused by, because that fancy recall system is going to be using new information, presenting it to you in a different way that you're not used to, and essentially you just want to look at your picture or your mnemonic that you've created in that area of text so that you'll almost photographically memorize it. And by almost, I mean you can actually fully memorize photographically a page in your textbook that you've drawn and written out in detail if you've gone through the process of reviewing it several times. Every time you review a specific topic or concept, you need to be using that page in your book and that picture that you've drawn in order to review it. So I used good old pencil and paper and just ripped off pages in order to create my own flashcards. And on one side, I would say either review this table or review this concept, or even just ask a question. On the other side, I would draw either a detailed diagram of the answer on how I was going to remember it or a table, or I would just put in the page number of where to find that in my textbook. That way, every time I hit that flashcard, I open up my textbook onto that page, and there it is, written in my own ink and my own pencil, my little silly diagram. And then the other way that I would review, like I said before, was just reading my textbook over and over. I would try to split up my text into chapters and then tell myself which day and which time I'd reviewing those certain chapters or parts of them if they're long ones, so that I could see my silly little diagrams and little drawings again and again. And this brings me to number three, it's the textbook. I literally had to use as few textbooks as possible and preferably one. I'm going to explain how I memorized a particular textbook down to the punctuation. This textbook was a board review book created for medical students in order to pass the board licensing examination called the USMLE, the United States Medical Licensing Exam. You see, I would use flashcards to ask myself a question, and then I would have to photographically remember exactly where it was in my textbook, find it, or just try to bring it up and process it in my brain so that I had the image in front of me. If I didn't get out quite the detail or the specifics of that image or that information, I would go ahead and open up my textbook, find that page, and review it. I know it sounds crazy, but it's almost like a spatiotemporal form of learning. It's definitely not the perfect eidetic memory and not the perfect type of photographic memory, which I definitely don't have, but it's almost like an artificial photographic memory by way of reviewing something that you've created in a textbook and then finding it over and over again. That way, when I had to critically think on a question or try to come up with an answer, I was able to literally visualize that picture or that diagram in front of my head and answer the question critically thinking using that information. It was almost like I had the textbook out in front of me. Now, those are my main techniques, but I will mention one last thing, and that's time. I spent a lot of my time using these few techniques and reading very few textbooks, but repeatedly using them over and over again so that I could literally memorize that information. I'm not sure if many of you have done theater, but rehearsing and reciting lines over and over again from your playbook is one of the best ways to memorize long excerpts of a musical or a play. It's like somebody who's practicing their speech multiple times over in order to have it memorized. They're reading one small excerpt or one playbook over and over again. And people are able to do this within a month or a week's time. Something like medical school is going to be a lot more information, so you need to be reviewing one textbook or only just a couple of textbooks and making sure that you do how you learn best. That's how I memorized things in medical school, and I did pretty well on the boards. I was able to match my competitive specialty, and I was able to learn a huge amount of sheer medical information, and hopefully that will serve me well taking care of my patients in the future. Please like and subscribe, let me know how I'm doing, and please ask any questions below on anything you want me to talk about. As always, good luck.